Part of what makes the human condition what it is our striving, if you will, during life to achieve something. Aspirations. We want lives for ourselves, don't we? Some of us maybe captains of industry, maybe a long-standing career that leaves a mark of impression on the rest of the world for all eternity. Certainly some pretty lofty goals to be had there. It doesn't always happen that way, of course. There are those who have lived and died with barely a scant trace that they were even here, if it weren't for the benevolence of maybe somebody else who left a marker behind that said that you were here. Even worse, in my estimation, is that the only thing about your life is what's written on that stone. Because of all of these stones that are around us here, there's far more than just what's written on the stone. Of course, underneath every one of them is a story of lives lived and happiness and sorrows and achievements of these people as they have gone on about their lives. But as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you'll find that their only story occurs upon their death. It's almost sort of a waste in a way. It's a bit sad, really. It's a lot sad. I mean, let's not mince words here. Death is a fairly tragic event. It's even more tragic when you're only known by how you died, especially when you came into this world completely and totally unknown.
Every stone marks a story. Interesting stories, people like you and I. History that should be recounted. Here we toast those you may or may not know who have gone on before us and left behind their tales to be told. Here we'll be drinking with dead people.
Buried here underneath this oak tree, just quite literally a little underhanded stone's throw from no man's land, which is the mass grave of the yellow fever, lies this marker for Kate McCormick. Not much is known about Kate. In fact, very little. I don't know anything about it. And by the time you're done watching this, you'll know just as much as I do about Kate. It starts in the 19th century. It's really where the story really is, because this is where she lived and died here in Memphis. 1875 is when she passed away. The 19th century here in this part of the country was rough and tumble, as it were. It was still sort of the frontier, was still sort of the West. Memphis was founded in around 1820. And at that point, there really wasn't a whole lot here. Decent farmland, a few Native Americans, and a very long river. Became a viable point for traffic and commerce up and down the river, and hence Memphis became quite the port city. Life here, as I mentioned, wasn't always easy. In 1875, we were about, roughly 8 or 9 years out of the yellow fever. Devastating situation that happened here. If you want to learn more about it, I've done a thing about No Man's Land, and you can find it in the archive here in Season 1 of Drinking with Dead People. But it's not Kate's story at all. Kate didn't die from yellow fever. Kate died at the age of 21. So why are we talking about Kate? What's the story here? Why is this even remotely important? Well, it's really quite a remarkable tale, really. As I mentioned, nobody really knew who Kate was. According to her headstone, as it says here, she was seduced by her father's friend. She was raped. She died on a table during the process of an abortion. She was 21. In this spot, the site of her funeral, only her mother came and dropped a single red rose. The funeral paid for by the benevolence of an unknown individual, presumably those who have put this stone here as well. That's the story. That's all we know. There's a bit of a curse on here. It says that she was the victim of an unforgiving society. Have mercy on us, is what it says at the bottom of the stone. Cautionary tale, perhaps. It points to a time when life was already difficult, exacerbated by antiquated butchery of medicine at the time, not as advanced as we've certainly become over 150 years, for sure. Nevertheless, it cost Kate McCormick her life. She was 21 years of age. Barely at the, well, I guess probably some would say, well, that was her middle age at that time. Because when you're a young lady in the 19th century, you have hopes and dreams and aspirations and things that you'd like to accomplish. Perhaps marry into a wealthy family, a landowner. Have a lot of children, perhaps. Have a nice big plot of land to spread out upon and a nice big house with cupboards of your own materials. It's those types of things that any girl would dream of. Certainly Kate's life was no different, aside from the fact that it took a horrendous turn, seduced by a friend of her father, a friend of the family, raped, and died while having an abortion. Completely horrific and wrong. What other kind of story could Kate have left us? We'll never know, because this is all we know about Kate McCormick, who lies now underneath this oak tree, forever a bit of a stop on the tour at Elmwood Cemetery for people to come and say hello. Pause for a moment and think about their own lives, because sometimes other people's lives can become guides for our own. Not to be maudlin or even certainly too retrospective about such matters, but it's important to remember that we're all human. Sometimes our lives are worth more than others, just by virtue of the circumstances we find ourselves in. And to Kate, here's to you. Be sure and subscribe to the channel. Give us a like. And join us next time as we wander among the headstones of history and go drinking with dead people.